I'm white trash talking.
Hello, everyone. I'm Doug Johnson, and I'm White Trash Talking. So today I'd like to look at recent actions taken by the U.S. in the context of empire, and to assess its motivations, behaviors, and results within this context. I'd like to show you a quote by Noam Chomsky that best encapsulates what is happening now with the U.S. empire. Here's the quote. "A dying empire often becomes desperate. Quote, it has no mechanism to stop itself despite its numerous defeats, fiascos, blunders, and diminishing power from striking out irrationally like a wounded animal." The U.S., as I reported last week, is waging a three-front war against BRICS, and it is openly committing genocide against Gazans through its proxy, Israel. These, I will argue, are the desperate actions of a dying empire, striking out irrationally like a wounded animal. The war against Russia, waged on false pretenses and outright lies, meant to weaken and destroy a main pillar of the BRICS trading alliance, has been a disaster. Over 1 million Ukrainian soldiers are dead, and the U.S. has essentially lost this war. Furthermore, the second front of the U.S. war against BRICS, the war in Iran, is not going as planned. The recent 12-day battle ended after Israel sustained heavy damage and begged for a ceasefire. It's not clear what will happen next, so I would like to present the views of three experts who summarize the current status and who describe an alternative strategy by the U.S. to consolidate control of West Asia by constructing a free trade zone that rivals the BRICS trading alliance. First is Larry Johnson, a former CIA analyst who dispels any doubts that the 12-day battle was another U.S. loss. Here's Larry Johnson.
Because Iran was on the threshold of defeating Israel militarily. I mean, comprehensively. The first thing that happened is Iran shut down Israel's one international airport, Ben Gurion Airport. All of a sudden now, no more commercial flights coming in and out. The only flights getting in and out of Israel were military flights. So people that wanted to travel to get the hell out, they had no way out. They were trapped. Iran, by contrast, has 29 international airports. So Israel may have shut down 2 or 3, but the other 26 kept operating. Iran has 8 ports in the south that access the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman. Israel only has 2 container ports, Haifa and Ashdod. Both were attacked and shut down by Iran. So now, not only is there no way to fly out of the country, now they don't have any way to get products in, products out. Those 2 ports are effectively closed, and ships are staying away because of the insurance. They're afraid they're going to get attacked. Then Iran hit the 2 oil refineries, the oil refinery in Haifa and the oil refinery in Ashdod. All of a sudden, all this oil that was being processed for diesel fuel and such, gone. So Israel was really facing, you could make a case of an existential threat economically. And at the end, it was Israel begging for the ceasefire. And we don't even know the damage done to military bases. We know that the IDF headquarters was hit, Mossad headquarters was hit, Unit 8200 headquarters was hit, the Weizmann Institute, which played a major role in nuclear research for Israel, that was destroyed. So Iran really inflicted some serious damage. I think that this whole Trump escapade with respect to going to war with Iran, we attacked without justification or cause another country, a country actually that was a signatory to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and a country that was allowing IAEA inspectors into its facility. And it turned out IAEA betrayed Iran by giving up the names of all their scientists so that they could be killed.
Okay, so here's a map taken from Sonar 21, which is Larry Johnson's website. And unfortunately, it's too small to make out the detail of the print. But these are The places in red is where Israel sustained heavy damage from Iranian missiles. And some of the things, most of which Larry mentioned, are like the Ministry of War was heavily damaged, a technology hub where they produce chips, Mossad headquarters, oil refineries, power plants, etc. So this is unprecedented. Their missile shield didn't work, and they're sitting there vulnerable. So it's a new reality for Israel and for the Middle East in general. Larry Johnson failed to mention that the U.S. began the war with a sneak attack during a period of negotiations, and that the U.S. bombed Iran's nuclear facilities, both of which violate Article 2, subsection 4 of the UN Charter. These are serious offenses. He did mention that the CIA used the IAEA to spy on Iran and to gather data that they used to eventually assassinate the top scientists. Clearly, the U.S. cannot be trusted from this point on. They've reached a new low in terms of integrity and trustworthiness and so on. Iran, which was a signatory to the NPT and in full compliance, has now expelled the IAEA, and they've moved their 60% enriched uranium to an undisclosed location where further enrichment cannot be monitored. These actions have been illegal, reckless, and destabilizing. I would now like to present the views of Elina Xenophontos, a podcaster and political analyst, who explains why the U.S. is so desperate to destroy Iran and how it intends to create a free trade zone called the Gaza-2035 Plan, which aims to rival the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, used by BRICS. Here is Elina Xenophontos, taken from an interview on the Danny Haifang podcast.
When you sit down and look at the BRI, it basically most of the most significant trade routes and energy resources will pass through Iran, but it will also be a sort of a point where the East meets the West, but also connects with Africa. Iran has proven itself to be a military power. It's proven itself that it's able to defend itself. For the first time in the last 40 years, I would say in the last 8 years in total, we've seen Iran economically begin to prosper and establish economic trade relations with other countries, whether it be China, whether it be Russia, whether it be other countries within BRICS. So this is going to bring a lot of economic prosperity to Iran. And if these alliances begin to form, and like I said as well, BRICS, it will even encourage the creation of more bilateral trade agreements and the industrialization of the global South. This means that the West is significantly going to lose its war to sustain imperialism. They're going to try to sort of end the war in Gaza temporarily. They're going to try to bring in the Gulf states. And when you also sit down to consider the massive investments that took place between the big deal of the century, sort of between Trump and Saudi Arabia and the Gulf monarchs, a lot of that had to do with AI and these sort of huge investments that are going to take place in the Gulf states. I think we can basically see that an alignment, sort of a realignment between the Gulf monarchs and the U.S. is currently happening. They're going to try to consolidate power over Gaza. I think that there's going to be a gradual transition of power to the Gulf monarchs in collaboration with the U.S. and these private contractors that are actually currently in Gaza as we speak. And as that takes place, it's going to become more socially acceptable, or so they believe, as it's going to be an Arab rule over the Gaza Strip, therefore playing into the demagoguery of the region as opposed to Israel. As this basically takes place, this would actually serve the interests of the Gulf monarchs, who also want to essentially establish and have access to the ports in Gaza and to the East Mediterranean by establishing new trade routes as well that they plan to use through Israel, through Gaza, Saudi Arabia, IMEC being one of them, among other sort of trade routes. They're going to try to isolate the BRI project and sort of create this kind of competitive trade route, and then in doing so isolate Iran even further. And when that happens, I think at the opportune moment they will try to target Iran again in other ways, because Iran can simply not exist in its current form and cannot be allowed to prosper because if it does, that means that Western imperialism itself and its ability to assert itself will be significantly diminished.
Okay, so she's very well spoken, very articulate. Here is a map that I showed a couple of weeks ago on this podcast. It's the BRICS Trading Alliance route the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, coming from the east, as well as the international north-south transit corridor coming from Russia in the north and going down to India, both pass through Iran, which is circled in green. Iran has become an important hub of the BRICS trading alliance, and they're entering into a period where they're going to begin to grow and prosper. Here's the alternative trade route that's been proposed under Gaza-2035 Plan. And you see the thin lines. These are rails that stem from the Gulf Arab states in the sea through Saudi Arabia to the Red Sea. And you see these little marks that are oil refineries up towards Israel on the far top left. And you see the bright green, which is Gaza in the upper left. And all of this requires the use of Gaza, the takeover of Gaza, of course, and the takeover of Iran. Rather than accept a multipolar world in which all countries control their own resources, the U.S. wants to exploit the entire world. As Elina Xenophontos says, Iran stands in the way of this plan. Here's Greg Stoker to explain in more detail about the Gaza-2035 Plan. Greg is a military analyst and a former U.S. soldier.
There's a lot going on here. We're seeing pilot programs for U.S. private military contractors controlling and distributing aid in Gaza, humanitarian zones, which is also a front for surveillance and intelligence collection, all part of the proposed Gaza 2035 development plan. According to the 2035 documents, there are 3 steps for returning Gaza to self-governance. The first step, titled humanitarian aid, is planned to last 12 months. Israel will create safe areas free of Hamas control, starting with the north and slowly spreading south. A coalition of Arab countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Egypt, Bahrain, Jordan, Morocco, will apportion and supervise humanitarian aid in the safe areas. In stage 2 would occur in the next 5 to 10 years. The plan is to move Israeli security responsibility to Israel, while the Arab coalition will create a multilateral body called the Gaza Rehabilitation Authority to oversee the reconstruction efforts and manage the Strip's finances. And of course, major advantages for the Gulf states under the logic of this plan that take part would include defensive pacts with the U.S. and unfettered access to Gaza's Mediterranean ports through railways and pipelines. The plan also says that if such an intervention is successful in Gaza, it can be repeated in Yemen, Syria, and Lebanon. This is all part of a pilot test program for what they want to enact in other regions or other parts of West Asia that will not be comprador or normalize with Israel and, by extension, listen to the will and bend to the will of the United States. Obviously, Syria is going to normalize, I think.
Okay, so the idea of self-governance for Gaza is another U.S. deception. The Gazans, who are now being slaughtered, will have no say, no autonomy, no statehood, and Hamas will be eradicated according to this plan. Again, I go back to the quote by Chomsky, that dying empires, unable to accept their decline, often lash out like injured animals. How can the U.S. win the world's hearts and minds when it uses subjugation and death as its means? How can the U.S. build partnerships and trust when deceit is its M.O.? How can any plan that includes mass killing or genocide be viable? The U.S.'s role as global hegemon is finished. The global South has had enough of Western imperialism and is ready to move on. But the violent throes of this dying animal remain a threat, and the world needs to be wary. Okay, that's all I have to say. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you next week. Thank you very much. Bye.